So I was going to do research for this video, but then I got to thinking. I'm obsessed with Brittany Broski. If you know me, this is well established. I watch the Broski Report every Tuesday. Half of that show is her Googling stuff, and it's entertaining. Nowhere near as entertaining, but I thought we could Google things in real time. And as I'm reading things, I'm going to share my opinion with you as a sex educator, which means that we're going to acknowledge first and foremost that my opinion is subject to change, okay, as I learn more information. I'm going to start out with what I know of the situation. I know that there's an OnlyFans creator named Lily Phillips. I'm just going to tuck this in here while we Google. Okay. Her name's Lily Phillips, right? It's not like Lily Phillips. Okay, yes, Lily Phillips. I know that Lily Phillips, who is an OnlyFans creator, challenged herself to sleep with 100 men in a day. 100. And that she also created a documentary around it. I don't know if it was her who created it or somebody else who created it, but she co-signed it. She endorsed it. She's from the UK. There is another OnlyFans model / porn star named Bonnie Blue, who's also from the UK. The two of them often get lumped in together, and I don't necessarily think that's fair because Bonnie Blue has done some things that, in my opinion, are quite predatory, a little spooky-ooky.
Our next guest is one of the most controversial people online.
25-year-old Bonnie Blue from Derbyshire is making headlines around the world for filming herself having sex with teenagers and posting the footage online. She's been labelled a predator and has even been banned from Australia and thrown out of Fiji after planning to recruit the young men that she describes as barely legal to film with.
Bonnie says she's not doing anything illegal and doesn't sleep with anyone under the age of 18, but her critics say the men she's targeting are too young to understand the repercussions of what they're doing.
So is she just a content creator making money or a dangerous predator who should be stopped? Bonnie joins us now.
And I know that Lily Phillips' whole 100 men in a day challenge was to try to break the world record. I think it's over 1,000 men in a day, but I believe that Bonnie Blue beat her to it. Let me double check that. Okay, yes. This Daily Mail UK article starts with, Lily Phillips has reportedly ditched her bid to sleep with 1,000 men in 24 hours after Bonnie Blue piped her to it, Brits. Yeah, Bonnie Blue claimed to have slept with 1,057 men in just 12 hours on January 11th. Bonnie Blue is 25. Oh, I thought she was older. See, I'm not here to bully Bonnie Blue. I'm 25 though, and she doesn't really look. Oh, wow. Okay, other things I know about Lily Phillips, and this is really what I wanted to talk about. When she made a documentary about sleeping with 100 men in a day, there's a part in the documentary where she cries. She says in the documentary and after the documentary that the reason that she was so upset was because she's A, overwhelmed, and B, felt bad for disappointing men who had come to the event who hadn't been able to have sex with her. My TikTok For You page, my Twitter feed
were flooded with clips of Lily Phillips crying.
It seemed like the general consensus from people on the internet was that she wasn't in fact crying because she disappointed some of the people who showed up, some of the men who showed up, but was actually because this was and had to be some form of self-harm. And what inspired me to want to talk about this as a long form video is that I really don't think people realize how different we as individuals are and how different the ways that we approach sex can be. I feel like I say this all the time, that sex means drastically different things to different people, but I don't think a lot of people realize how drastic those differences are. And I think that has to do with us having a dominant religious culture in this country and a deeply religious history that is really hard to separate and parse out from our current culture because it's so deeply ingrained. These ideas of purity and of shame, even if you're not a religious person, being raised in this culture where sex has to mean commitment, marriage, or just that there's any moral connotation around sex at all. Not every person in the world would identify sex as a deeply emotional thing, or even a slightly emotional thing. And while it's certainly not as simple as every person who is a sex worker flocks to sex work because they think it's going to be this empowering journey for them, and it really doesn't have to be. The reason that we say sex work is because it's a job. And the conversations that we should be having more often are around workers' rights and not this need for sex workers to be representatives for women or be
I'm getting sidetracked.
What I'm trying to say is at the outset, without having done a lot of this deep research, I do fully believe that it is entirely possible that somebody could have sex with 100 people in a day and have that not be self-harm. I think that for full service sex workers or sex workers who are engaging in sex with clients or with people on camera, when we look at that population and we also look at the population of people who don't approach sex from a deeply emotional place, the people who think of sex not necessarily as always being a display of intimacy and trust, connection, commitment, but maybe who think of sex as being about pleasure, about our bodies doing things that are natural for our bodies to do. You can see why people who operate that way might be more inclined to then go on and get paid to have sex or have sex be a part of their job. Whether they find that empowering or if it just works better with the type of person they are. And so I think that when Lily Phillips is telling us the reason that she's upset is because she feels like disappointing people, I don't get why we can't just take her at her word. Which is not me saying that I'm 1,000% sure that I won't find out later on that this experiment was something that she didn't have a great relationship with. I don't know this person. She could be lying to us. Anybody could be lying to us about any given thing, right? But I think our inclination...
Is that a word?
I think our inclination, if that's a word, to not take her at her word, to not take what Lily Phillips is saying as true, has much more to do with the fact that most of us watching can't possibly imagine doing something like that, having sex with 100 people in one day and having it not be self-harm. But just because we couldn't imagine doing it ourselves doesn't mean that that's what it is for her. In talking to people about their sex lives every day, there is no bigger takeaway than the fact that different people
are very different.
It can be hard for somebody who's vanilla to wrap their head around kink. It can be hard for somebody who's monogamous to wrap their head around polyamory. I am both vanilla and monogamous, and I'm in community with people who are super kinky and super poly, and it's at times hard for me to wrap my head around. There's a lot of times where I say,
I can't imagine doing that myself.
But I recognize that I'm not everyone. And a lot of the way that the internet talks about kink and polyamory as well is very similar to the way that we're talking about this, where we assume just because we wouldn't do it, that there's something wrong with that person over there. Let's hop into this research. I'll just start. This is a 47-minute documentary, so I will not be watching this entire thing.
Right here.
It was posted by Josh Peters, who is essentially a YouTube documentarian, who has also posted an uncensored version, which of course he is profiting off of on his Patreon. You can buy it for $4. That's the other thing I want to hop into. From what I read about Lily Phillips during this entire thing where my TikTok and Twitter were clogged with this story, I did see some people posting about how her mom is essentially her manager or manages her finances in some way.
I do agree that that is a red flag.
Obviously, we don't know her and her mom's relationship. And I think it's really incredible when parents support their children who decide to autonomously pursue a career in sex work. That being said, a career in sex work might make your interpersonal relationships really prone to having toxic power dynamics. If it was her boyfriend or even maybe like a sibling running her finances, I might side-eye that a little bit too. Speaking exclusively to Mail Online, she said, I didn't get into OnlyFans because I was desperate for money. My parents loved to spoil us. I had a comfortable, happy life. It was the picture-perfect childhood and I had amazing parents, which I think is also cool and good for her. It totally flips on its head this narrative that people get into sex work because of the desperation, and we live in a flawed society that even allows desperate women to sell their bodies. Of course, there are people who pursue sex work out of survival. There are survival sex workers. And then there are people with a lot of choices who feel like it's the industry that they want to be in. I'm trying to find something about her mom running her finances. Okay, my mom does my finances because she wants to help me. If they disowned me tomorrow, that would make everyone more upset. It does seem like what she's saying is that though her parents aren't pleased with her doing sex work, they help her. I don't really necessarily see that as big of a red flag as it maybe seemed at first. Yeah, I also forgot that she went on an interview interview with Candace Owens, which was frustrating for me to watch people who are left-leaning be like,
I can't believe I'm agreeing with Candace Owens.
that should be a red flag for you that you're on the wrong side of this argument, because from what I recall from watching the interview, Candace Owens was essentially bullying the girl.
And you're never going to have the prospects. You're not going to have a man that wants to have a family with you because they're going to see you as damaged goods. I get obviously what attracts you to this. I'm not going to be patronizing in these questions. It's money and it's fame. You know, these are demonic possessions. You know what people will do for this sort of attention. This is about money and fame for you. That's it. It's not, you didn't wake up one day and say, hey, it would be really amazing for me to be violated by like 1,000 guys. That's not a natural inclination that a woman has, but you have to commit to it.
Okay, the part of her crying is only a minute long.
I think that was kind of the hard part, is like conversing with them, and like when they'd kind of be like, oh, like we've only had 2 minutes or 3 minutes and you said 5 on the message.
Did someone say that to you?
Yeah. And obviously it just makes me feel so bad.
Do you think you should feel bad about that?
I guess when you've promised something to people who support you, it's kind of hard to let them down.
But it's up to you, right? Like when you know.
Yeah.
Have you even processed, do you think, what's happened?
Not yet.
Sometimes that feeling so like there's no way for any human being that a day like that wouldn't be overwhelming simply on a physical level. Before we get into projecting our own emotions onto this person, I definitely think it's worth including nuance in thinking about where self-harm is versus where a really, really bad day at work is. And I know that for certain populations, that's going to sound absolutely insane. Once again, if you can't imagine yourself doing something like that. And I do think if it's hard to watch on the basis of I can't imagine myself doing that, that's valid.
Don't watch it.
People think it's some kind of trauma or that I've been abused or I'm forced into doing this, and that's just not at all the truth. Because that's not truly how I feel about my work. It was a very intense day, and like anyone with a long, hard day at work, sometimes you get exhausted and upset. What did I say? We're always talking about believe women until the women are saying that they might have an okay relationship to the fact that they do sex work, that they have complex feelings about sex work, and sometimes that work is hard, but that doesn't mean that that work is self-harm. It is very, very clear that Lily Phillips is a marketing genius. She makes her decisions based on what will be jaw-dropping. She stirs the pot, and it gets her a lot of money. I know people have issues with the concept of choice feminism.
Let me Google choice feminism.
Choice feminism is a critical term for expressions of feminism that emphasize a woman's freedom of choice. Right. As opposed to systemic change. So an example I agree with where choice feminism is harmful, Candace Owens, right? Candace Owens chooses to be a right-wing journalist. Feminism fought for her to have that choice, to be able to work. She uses that choice to then disempower other women in real and harmful ways. A lot of feminists who criticize sex work will basically brush away any arguments that people could enjoy sex work and be operating from a place of autonomy by saying that it's choice feminism. It's not feminist that you chose to do sex work when sex work is inherently degrading towards women. First of all, that's not true. And second of all, I would urge those people to think long and hard about the ways that misogyny and profit are tied together, the ways that the sexualization of women have been used historically to keep women from making as much money as men, from being self-sufficient, and how radical and interesting it is that women have been able to turn that on its head and use the sexualization of women to build something for themselves, to be self-sufficient. And yes, that's a huge oversimplification. In a world where men profit from sex work too, there are pimps. There is money high up in companies like OnlyFans. Even on a smaller scale, strip clubs often run and operated by men. The list goes on. But with platforms like OnlyFans, with online sex work, increasingly women and non-men are making strides to be able to own more of the profits of their own labor. And I think that's really interesting and a place where we're seeing a lot of incremental progress. But I'm not of the belief that sex work, that being an OnlyFans star or a porn star is anti-woman in the slightest. I do also think that we should believe women. And just because we don't understand something or couldn't imagine doing something ourselves doesn't mean that there has to be something deeply wrong and disturbed with the person who's doing it. It just means we wouldn't do it ourselves. The lighting. See, guys, the lighting wasn't as shitty as it seemed. Okay, bye.